Step away from the vehicle
I'm just
now.
changing the tire. That's it. I haven't done anything.
Where's your ID? You look suspicious and uneasy, my friend.
What does that mean? I work downtown. I'm the city's legal director.
Step away! You're under arrest for suspicious behavior!
This is illegal. You know that.
It was just past dusk, and the streetlights flickered over the cracked asphalt of the quiet city road. Elijah Sanders, a tall, solidly built black man in his late 30s, had pulled over on the side of the road. His truck had a flat tire, right in the middle of a stretch that was too empty to feel safe, but too busy for anyone to ignore. Sweat dripped down his forehead as he wrestled with the lug wrench, trying to get the stubborn bolts off. He had barely gotten the spare out when a police car rolled up behind him. The engine idled, lights off at first, then suddenly flashing blue and red. Elijah froze, hands on the tire, as the officer stepped out. The man was white, mid-40s, uniform crisp, but the expression on his face was a mix of anger and suspicion. "Evening, sir. What are you doing?" the officer said, his voice tight. Elijah straightened, wiping his hands on his jeans. "Changing a flat," he said. "I just need a few minutes." The officer's eyes narrowed. "Flat tire, huh? Where's your ID?" Elijah's chest tightened. "I haven't done anything wrong. I'm just fixing my truck." The officer moved closer, almost looming over him. "Do you know why I'm asking?" he said, his tone sharp. "Because people like you, they don't just break down on the side of the road. Not usually." Elijah froze. The words hit like a cold wall. His hands clenched the wrench tighter. He realized right then that this wasn't about the tire. It was about him, his skin, his presence, his very being on this quiet street at this hour. Before he could respond, the officer grabbed his arm. "Step away from the truck." Elijah jerked back, heart pounding. "Why? I'm not." "Step away. Now." The officer's voice was louder, filled with something darker than authority, something personal. The truck's spare tire clattered to the ground, unnoticed. Elijah's eyes scanned the street, looking for anyone who could help, but the neighborhood was empty. Suddenly, a voice came from the officer's car. "Is this him again?" Elijah's stomach dropped. He didn't know who they were talking about, but the tone made it clear. He was being labeled, prejudged, criminalized before any proof. The officer tightened his grip and pulled out handcuffs. "You're under arrest," he said. "For suspicious behavior." Elijah's mind raced. Suspicious behavior? He was changing a flat tire. Every moment felt heavier, the air thicker, as if the street itself was closing in on him. Before he could resist, the officer snapped the handcuffs around his wrists. The metal bit into his skin, and a cold anger surged through him. He looked at the badge, at the gun at the officer's side, and the realization hit. He wasn't going to be believed if he fought back. Not here. Not now. As the officer shoved him toward the patrol car, Elijah caught a glimpse of the driver's side of his truck. The flat tire sat there, helpless and exposed. Everything about this moment screamed unfairness, and Elijah felt a deep, burning injustice clawing inside him. The officer's partner, seated in the patrol car, gave a quiet smirk. "City's lucky we're here, huh? Stop people like him from causing trouble." Elijah's jaw tightened. Trouble. He hadn't caused any. He had followed the law. He had stayed calm. Yet here he was, handcuffed in the street, judged solely by the color of his skin. Where are you watching from right now? Drop your city in the comments. And if you want to see how this unbelievable story unfolds, make sure to subscribe, because what happens next is going to shock you. As the patrol car started moving, the tension didn't ease. Elijah's thoughts swirled. How could this be happening in a city that claimed to uphold justice? How could a man, sworn to protect, treat another human being this way without cause? Inside the car, the officer finally spoke again, voice low, almost a whisper meant to sting. You think just because you work downtown, you're untouchable. You're not. No one is. Elijah realized something crucial. He had been in this city long enough to know the law, and this officer knew it too. That phrase, the one the officer muttered, hinted at power, at connections, at a system designed to favor some and punish others without reason. Elijah's work was well known. He wasn't just anyone on the street. He was the city's legal director, a position of respect, responsibility, and influence. Yet here he was, humiliated and restrained, treated like a criminal for something as ordinary as changing a tire. The car turned a corner, lights reflecting off storefronts. The officer glanced at him, cold, and said, "You'll learn your place soon enough." Elijah's mind raced, thinking of the phone calls he would have to make, the colleagues he might never see again that night, the news this could make if anyone cared to listen. But most importantly, he thought of the lesson this moment taught him. In this city, power, authority, and the law were tools that could be used to harm as easily as to protect, especially if you were black. He clenched his fists behind his back, letting the anger simmer. The car's engine hummed, and for the first time, Elijah understood how fragile justice could be when faced with prejudice. Every intersection they passed, every red light, every flicker of the street lamp above felt like the city itself watching him, judging him. And somewhere deep inside, he knew this was only the beginning. The patrol car rolled through the empty streets, Elijah's hands still cuffed behind him. The hum of the engine was the only sound for a moment, but the tension inside the car was heavier than any noise. Officer Ryan Callahan, white, mid-40s, and rigid, kept stealing glances at Elijah, like a predator assessing prey. His partner, Officer Lucas Kent, barely spoke, but the smirk on his face said it all. Elijah's mind raced. Every second felt like a lifetime. He had seen the justice system from the inside. He knew the law, knew procedure, and yet here he was, powerless, trapped, and humiliated in front of anyone who might drive by. He wanted to speak, to demand respect, to remind them who he was, but he knew better. Words could make this worse. "You think this city protects you?" Callahan finally said, his voice dripping with contempt. "Being the legal director, that means nothing out here. Not tonight." Elijah stayed silent. Every instinct screamed at him to fight, but the reality was clear. Resisting would be catastrophic. "You always get away, don't you?" Callahan continued. "Walking around downtown, making laws, telling people how to behave. But here, out here, on my street, you're just like the rest of them." Elijah's jaw tightened. The words weren't just rude, they were intentional. Racist. Designed to remind him of his place, to assert dominance. Every syllable burned. "Why me?" Elijah finally asked, keeping his voice calm, steady. "I wasn't breaking any law. I was changing a tire. That's all." Callahan laughed, short and bitter. "You think it's that simple? Out here, rules are different. You think this badge is just about enforcing the law. No. It's about control. About keeping people like you in line." Elijah looked out the window, trying to focus on the streetlights, the shops, the city he had served for years. The betrayal felt personal. He had defended people accused unjustly, fought for equality, and yet tonight, the very system he upheld was being wielded against him. Kent, the partner, finally spoke. "Honestly, Ryan, don't you think this is a bit much?" Callahan whipped his head toward him, voice cold. "Shut up. He needs a lesson. People like him, they forget who's really in charge." Elijah clenched his teeth, feeling the cuffs dig into his wrists. His phone was in his pocket, but even that small comfort felt useless. Any attempt to reach out could be twisted, misused. The city had its own rules tonight, and he was learning them the hard way. Minutes felt like hours. The car slowed as it approached the station, the building's harsh, fluorescent lights glaring against the darkness. Callahan's smirk turned into a full smile, one of victory. He was taking satisfaction in this power, and it made Elijah's blood boil. Inside the station, the hallway smelled of antiseptic and anxiety. Officers passed, some nodding politely, others staring with subtle curiosity. Elijah kept his head high, refusing to show fear, refusing to give them the satisfaction. But he knew appearances only go so far when every procedure could be used to degrade him further. The booking officer glanced at him, surprised. You're the city legal director." "Yes," Elijah said, steady. "And I am here under arrest for changing a tire." The officer's eyes widened. "That I've never seen." Callahan cut him off. "He's not above the law. Treat him like anyone else." His voice held a dangerous edge, as if daring anyone to question him. Elijah was led to a cell, the metal door clanging behind him. The cold air hit him like a wave. Alone, he leaned against the wall, breathing deeply, trying to calm the storm inside. He thought of the flat tire, of the street, of the officer's words. How quickly power could be twisted into oppression. How quickly respect could be stripped away. From the small window of the cell door, he could see Callahan talking with Kent, laughing quietly. The sound grated on Elijah's nerves. This wasn't about justice. It was about humiliation, control, and fear. He thought of his team downtown, the people who relied on him. If this escalated, if the story got out, what would they think? Could they even believe it? Or would the system protect one of its own and crush him silently, leaving him a cautionary tale? Hours passed. The night felt endless. Finally, an officer brought him a thin paper cup of water. "You want to make a call?" Elijah nodded. Every instinct told him to reach out, realizing even that act might be twisted against him. He had to be careful, deliberate. Strategy mattered even in the smallest moves. Suddenly, a guard opened the cell door. "Director Sanders, you have a visitor." Elijah's heart skipped. Who? How? The tension hit like a punch. He followed the guard into a small interview room. There, sitting across from him, was none other than the city mayor's assistant, a middle-aged woman named Claire Benson. Her expression was a mix of concern and urgency. "Elijah, we heard what happened," she said quietly. "We want to help, but we need to be careful." He nodded slowly, feeling a mix of relief and frustration. Relief that someone recognized the injustice. Frustration that he had to rely on political maneuvering to survive a situation that should never have happened. "You're going to need to stay calm," Claire continued, "and document everything. This could get very public, very fast." Elijah leaned back, letting the chair support him. The city had shown its face tonight, and it was darker than he ever imagined. The officer who arrested him wasn't just enforcing the law. He was sending a message. But Elijah was not someone to be silenced. He would fight, not only for himself, but for every person who could be treated this way, just for existing. As he sat there, plotting the next moves, he realized the night was far from over. The city had its secrets, and he was about to uncover some that were darker than anyone expected. By the first light of morning, Elijah Sanders was still sitting in that cold cell, wrists sore from the cuffs, mind sharp with determination. Sleep had barely touched him. Every passing hour had been a reminder. In this city, authority could be twisted into cruelty, and prejudice could wear a badge. Claire Benson, the mayor's assistant, returned early, carrying a thick folder. She set it on the table with a quiet gravity. "Elijah, this isn't just about a flat tire," she said. "We've been getting complaints, rumors, really, about Ryan Callahan. He's been under investigation before. Allegations of racial bias, excessive force, harassment, but nothing ever stuck. His connections in the department are strong. Elijah's eyes narrowed. He had suspected that the arrest wasn't random. The way Callahan had cornered him on the street, the tone, the power play, it was calculated. But hearing it confirmed made the weight heavier. Then why now? Elijah asked. Why risk arresting the city's legal director in public? He knows who I am. Claire's gaze was steady. He's sending a message. Not just to you. To anyone who thinks authority and justice are equal. He wants to remind the city that power isn't about law. It's about fear. And right now, he thinks he's untouchable. Elijah leaned back in the chair, his mind racing. Fear had no place here. Not tonight. Not ever. He had spent years defending people stripped of their rights, facing courts, fighting laws, and yet now he had to defend himself against someone abusing the very system he swore to uphold. The guard opened the cell door. You've got a phone call from your office. Elijah took it, his hands trembling slightly. On the line, his deputy's voice was tight but calm. Elijah, we saw what happened. The footage from the street, it's going viral fast. People are upset. The city council is asking questions. The mayor wants to meet with you as soon as possible. He swallowed, realizing that even in the middle of humiliation, the power of transparency could shift the scales. The officer may have tried to humiliate him, but the city had eyes everywhere. News spread faster than injustice. Good, Elijah said. Document everything. Every officer, every word, every step. I want a full record. Hours later, after a tense breakfast in the station cafeteria, Elijah was escorted to a small office where he could meet with lawyers and city officials. Callahan was nowhere to be seen. The absence of the officer did little to ease the anger Elijah felt. This was just the calm before the storm. I want this investigated fully, Elijah said to the assembled group. Not just dismissed as a misunderstanding. Not just covered up like the others. I want accountability. For me, yes, but for everyone he's targeted before. One of the city attorneys, a younger black woman named Tasha Reed, nodded. We'll get statements, review patrol car footage, body cams, street cameras. If he's done this before, we'll prove it. Elijah felt a surge of hope, but the tension didn't leave his body. He knew Callahan was smart. He had connections, allies in the department, a network that could twist facts, rewrite stories, and paint Elijah as the instigator. The officer wasn't just racist. He was strategic, confident, and dangerous. By late afternoon, Elijah's phone buzzed again. This time, the call came from a news producer. The footage of the arrest had leaked, and social media was on fire. Clips of him being handcuffed while changing a flat tire were circulating rapidly. Comments poured in, outrage, disbelief, accusations against the police department. Elijah realized something critical. This wasn't just a personal battle anymore. It was a public reckoning. The city was watching, the media was watching, and the system's bias was on display for everyone to see. He called Claire back. We need to act fast. Callahan can't control the narrative if the truth gets out first. Hours passed with constant phone calls, strategy meetings, and public statements being drafted. Elijah felt the weight of responsibility heavier than ever. Not just for himself, but for everyone in the city who had ever been wronged by abuse of power. Late that night, Elijah returned to his small apartment, exhausted but restless. He could feel the tension from the day still clinging to him. Every street corner, every familiar building felt different now. He had always loved this city, believed in its promise of fairness, but tonight, he had seen its darker side. How prejudice, when combined with authority, could humiliate and harm without consequence. He thought of Callahan again, the officer who had arrested him without cause, who had tried to assert dominance with a twisted sense of control. Elijah knew the fight was far from over. The city might be watching, But this man had power in quiet, unseen corners, and that power was dangerous. As he finally lay down to sleep, Elijah felt the surge of determination that had carried him through so many battles before. He had faced corrupt officials, unjust laws, and biased courts. Tonight was no different, only the stakes were higher. Tomorrow, he would confront Callahan, confront the system, confront the fear. And he would do it with everything he had learned over decades defending justice. Because this wasn't just about a flat tire. This was about respect, accountability, and the truth. And somewhere in the city, Ryan Callahan sat in his own home, confident, smirking, believing the night had gone according to plan. But Elijah Sanders was just getting started. The next morning, the city was buzzing. Social media had exploded overnight. Videos of Elijah Sanders being handcuffed while changing a flat tire were everywhere. News outlets ran the footage, headlines screaming about city legal director arrested unjustly, and racist cop targets top lawyer. People from every neighborhood, every background were talking, posting, demanding answers. Elijah sat in his office downtown, hands wrapped around a coffee cup, staring out at the skyline. He had spent the night strategizing with his legal team. Tasha Reed had pulled together statements from witnesses, dashcam footage, and prior complaints against Officer Ryan Callahan. Every piece was a thread in a growing case that could finally hold Callahan accountable. The phone buzzed. Claire Benson's voice was urgent but calm. "Elijah, the mayor wants you at City Hall. They're expecting you now." Elijah took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the city on his shoulders. Every step outside this office felt heavy. Every glance at a passerby, a reminder that the public eye was watching. He knew Callahan would be watching too. The officer wouldn't accept losing without a fight. When Elijah arrived at City Hall, the tension was palpable. Council members, lawyers, and senior officers crowded into the conference room. Callahan sat at the far end, flanked by a few of his allies. He looked smug, as if he had already won. But Elijah didn't flinch. He had witnesses, proof, and the city behind him. "Mr. Sanders," one council member began, "we've seen the footage. We want your account." Elijah's voice was steady. "I was changing a flat tire. That's all. There was no crime, no threat, no reason for arrest. Officer Callahan acted on prejudice. I am the city's legal director, yes, but that should not matter. No one should be treated like this because of their skin color." Callahan's face darkened. "I was doing my job," he snapped. He refused to comply. "I acted for public safety." Elijah held up the dashcam footage, letting it play in the room. Every move, every word, every unjust action was clear. The room went quiet. Callahan's excuses crumbled under the weight of evidence. "You can see," Elijah continued, "that my hands were never threatening, that the situation was entirely under control, and that the arrest was based solely on bias. This is not the first time Officer Callahan has been accused of racial discrimination. The city cannot ignore this pattern any longer." Whispers filled the room. Allies of Callahan shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Even some senior officers avoided eye contact. The video and statements were damning. Then Elijah paused. "I am not here to destroy anyone's career personally. I am here to ensure justice, accountability, and public trust in this city's law enforcement. If we cannot uphold fairness for one person, we fail everyone." Callahan leaned back, fury simmering. "You think your position and your fame will protect you?" Elijah's gaze didn't waver. "No. The truth protects itself. And right now, the truth is in front of you." The council deliberated. It was tense, every second stretching. Finally, the chair spoke. "Given the evidence, we will place Officer Callahan on immediate suspension pending a full investigation. We will also launch a review of all his prior conduct." Callahan's face turned red, jaw tight. He sputtered, but no one listened. Elijah felt a wave of relief wash over him, but he knew this wasn't the end. The fight for accountability in the department would continue, but this was a start. Outside, the streets were alive with people who had followed the story. Elijah walked back to his office, hearing snippets of conversations, people praising the courage it took to speak out. He thought of every person who had ever been treated unfairly by authority, every moment of fear, humiliation, and silence. That evening, back in his apartment, Elijah reflected. The arrest had been a personal attack, a blatant abuse of power, yet it had exposed cracks in a system that needed fixing. He had felt fear, anger, and vulnerability, but he had also felt resilience and purpose. Claire Benson called again. Elijah, the city owes you more than words, but this is a step. People are paying attention now. Change is possible. Elijah smiled, a mix of exhaustion and satisfaction. Yes, and it starts with holding people accountable, no matter their badge or position. The city has to see that justice isn't negotiable. As he finally leaned back in his chair, he realized that the flat tire, the arrest, and the humiliation had become more than an injustice. They had become a spark for change, accountability, and courage in the face of blatant racism. Somewhere, Ryan Callahan sat alone, his authority stripped for the moment, forced to face scrutiny he had never considered. The city had seen the truth, and while the fight wasn't over, justice had started to push back against abuse. Elijah Sanders knew that the struggle against prejudice would continue. But tonight, he had turned fear into power, bias into exposure, and injustice into a lesson the city would never forget. And somewhere in the heart of the city, ordinary citizens, watching, listening, and learning, understood that courage and truth could challenge even the most entrenched authority.